So, all right, Tim Cisar, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. I know that you are an avid listener. You're also my father-in-law, and I really I think a lot of you because, there's many examples that you set in your community. You're a lawyer, but you also are a dad of 6 kids. I think that you're a true leader, and I'm kind of wanting to ask you a bit about some of those leadership qualities that you have, and what really got you into the legal field.
That's a compound question.
It's a lot. We'll unpack it as we kind of go along. Tell me about young Tim Cisar, before you had kids, before you were a lawyer, those kind of things.
As I'm prone to say, I'm twice the man now that I used to. I describe myself as a skinny man trapped in a fat man's body. Because
okay.
I have very few disciplines when it comes to eating. I enjoy eating.
Yeah, I understand.
And I learned while I was a fairly decent athlete all through college and law school. It was a situation where, I'm going to turn my phone off. There we go. It was a situation where I found out after graduating that if you keep eating like a horse, stop exercising like a horse, you end up not looking the way you used to look.
Yeah.
I used to say you wind up looking like a pig, So,
yeah.
So the younger Tim Cisar would be about 150 pounds lighter than what I am, mostly because stress from work and eating do wondrous things to a body. Wondrous is the wrong word, but they do awful things to a body. So my advice would be, don't get stressed and don't get fat, because once you get fat, it don't come off. So.
Well, you're talking about being an athlete like way back in the day. So you're a Notre Dame graduate.
Yes, sir.
And I have heard stories about how intramurals was a huge thing back on campus. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, and it probably still is. There's a couple things I can tell you. Intramural football. First of all, at Notre Dame, about 85 to 90% of these students live on campus. So they live on campus in dorms. There's no frats, no sororities. Notre Dame is one big frat, okay? And so the intramurals are broken up by the dorms. And you've got a lot of frustrated athletes that didn't get to go where they wanted to go for Division I athletics and decided to go to Notre Dame. The intramural football, for example, is 11 on 11, full pad tackle football. It is, it is everything you want to think times 10.
Man.
We have all state at every position that aren't playing college football. They're playing intramural football at Notre Dame. I promise you, there are some small colleges and they would have A division and B division and C division, but there are some small colleges that would get their rear ends kicked by the championship of the intramurals every year. It's just incredible. And basketball was basically the same way. You couldn't have more than, and Notre Dame was unusual because it didn't divide up the athletes to their own dorm. The athletes lived everywhere. So Joe Montana could have lived next door to you. Ross Browner's little brother Jimmy was a good friend of mine. They lived in the dorms. So when you got your teams together, for example, the basketball teams, you could not have more than one varsity basketball player and more than like 2 varsity athletes altogether on your team. They made sure they weren't clumped together. And so, it was fine. I was on the only thing I have a claim to fame is that my senior year of Notre Dame, I sat the bench mostly, but they needed me a couple times on the A division basketball team. We won intramurals my senior year. Okay. And then St. Louis University, where I went to law school, my senior year again, we won A division intramural basketball at St. Louis University. Again, I sat on the bench mostly, but I'm going to define myself as the glue that kept the team together.
Somebody has to do that. It's a very important job.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very important job. So outside of, intramurals, let me back up. I think there's a lot that has changed between when you were doing intramurals and when I was in college. Like, I didn't do intramural sports. I played Quidditch actually in college. I don't know if you knew that or not.
I saw a picture of you doing that this is your memory on Facebook, something in the last 6 months.
Yeah, so that was that was an interesting time, and if it's never come up or never comes up again, I'll explain it right here. So when I moved to the University of Arkansas, I was 2 years into my education. I was going in as a junior, and I moved in with my former boss's son. His name's Will, and Will was already very active, and I had a hard time making friends when I moved up there. But Will, we would just have people over at our apartment, which happened to be the Quidditch people, and that's how I ended up playing Quidditch. Full contact, it was co-ed. That part of it was kind of weird to me, but Quidditch was, I guess,
as opposed to just playing Quidditch all by itself, perfectly normal, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I actually broke a pinky playing Quidditch. I know. It was tough. It was full contact.
You understand that in Harry Potter, they actually flew and you have a hard time flying. You got that part, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, just making sure we have that together then. Okay.
But the competition was still there. I mean, we ended up, we went to North Carolina, we went to Kansas State. I mean, we would travel to do this kind of stuff. Yeah, it wasn't just like going from Arkansas to Oklahoma to play. I mean, I remember going to San Marcos, Texas, and traveling. It was university funded. Interesting club sport, but either way, intramurals, Notre Dame, that your time there in Notre Dame, it wasn't just like, hey, here's my foundation. That's also where you met your wife. Tell me a little bit about y'all's story and her story and how y'all came to be.
Well, I was a junior living with 3 sophomores. We had a quad. And one night, about 1 a.m, I was another hour, maybe midnight, another hour's worth of studying to go. And so I grabbed my roommate, who is now a judge in Ohio. And I said, let's go to the Darby's place. It was called the Naz during the evening, and then Darby's place after midnight. One of the priests brought his little Cocker Spaniel over and kept it open from midnight to like 3 o'clock. So you'd have a late night place to get a donut, a cup of coffee, and go study. So Rich and I walked over there, and about 12:30, 1 o'clock, I was getting to grab a cup of coffee and a donut. I walked in, and there was this beautiful girl behind the counter volunteering, and I went gaga eyes, and I introduced myself, and I asked her when she was working next, and she told me. I came back the week later and I'd practiced all week. I was going to ask her out. She didn't even remember my name. But my timing has always been my strong suit. I came back right at a time right after another guy weirder than me had kind of asked her to walk her home after her shift ended at 2 a.m. And so I walked in after that, and she was like, how am I going to do this to this weirdo out there? I wasn't as weird as that guy. So when I said, hey, I'm Tim, Cisar, we met last week. And she says, yeah, I don't remember, but cool. I said, well, can I walk you home? She goes, yes. So I got to walk her home because I wasn't as weird as the other guy.
Interesting. I mean, how weird. I feel like now if a guy offered to walk a girl home, it would be like maybe not, but I mean,
it's definitely a different time now.
Yeah.
Chris and I, my wife is Chris, for those of you listening. We were talking the other day, we would not want to raise children today, just the environment. It's a different world today than even 40 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking on children, you guys have 6 kids. What is it like being that outnumbered?
Never really felt 3, 4, 5, and 6 were the same. It was the equal amount of craziness. Always kind of crazy, never felt outnumbered because I was a big man. So, never came to a point where, and in fact, you could always divide and conquer. You could always turn a couple of the kids on the other.
Yeah. Well, you have a really strong personality. I mean, my parents think that you're awesome, and I don't think there's a room that you go into that if you walk in it, you don't have control of it eventually. I mean, it's a gift of yours to be able to come in and just take over and have that kind of confidence in a room to where you're like, the floor's mine now. How do you apply that in your legal work?
Well, and it's one of those, I guess gifts is the right word, that you don't even realize you have.
Mm-hmm.
Because I get that from a lot of people, lawyers, clients, judges, and you get it either directly complimenting you or in side comments to he does that to us too, that kind of thing. So it is a gift that I apply in my work just by being myself. And in fact, that's the best advice I could ever give to any lawyer, and for that matter, any person working. Just be yourself. And for me, it's fortunate that I've really not really gone. I've not gone to work. I enjoy what I do.
Mm-hmm.
There are aspects of everyone's job that bite. We all dislike parts of our jobs. Administration, I got to run a business, whatever it is. But to truly sit down in the midst of that and enjoy what you do is a gift from God. And I'm in that spot and always have been. I work hard. I don't always enjoy things, but I get to say at the end of every day, and I still get goosebumps even right now when I say it, I defend people and I defend their constitutional rights. I defend the Constitution of the United States of America. Mm-hmm. And you know what? If you don't get excited about that, it's hard for me to get you excited as an attorney.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So to answer your question, I guess, I use the presence without even really realizing I'm using it. I walk in, I assess, I do what I've got to get done, and I get out. And that has been described to me much as you just described it to me as you take command of the room when you walk in. Well, all I'm doing is going in, assessing the situation, finding what the resolution is, getting the resolution, getting out of there. Because if I stay there too long, I'll screw things up,
Mm-hmm.
So, or if I say too much.
Yeah. So you're talking about kind of a little bit of the administrative side of your business. Tell people a little bit about, I guess, the size of your business, how many people you had work for you. Have you ever had any partners? How does that go? What is the business side of what you do? How does that look?
Right now, for the first time, and it's coming on 2 years in my career, I'm in basically a solo practice. I've got another attorney who's of counsel. She helps me out on a few cases here and there. But for the first time in a while, I don't have an associate or a partner. I have been a part of a firm as big as 10 lawyers, and I've had my own firm on and off since there was a 4-year period when we merged with another firm, and my name wasn't on the letter, it wasn't on the sign. But other than that, and maybe the first couple of years of my practice, it's always been either somebody in Cisar or Cisar and somebody, or now it's the Cisar law firm. But I have had in my firm, I want to say up to 5 lawyers at the height. Mm-hmm. When we were running and gunning. When you're back down to yourself, while I know the courthouse is in an hour in every direction, I have kind of brought it back down to just the 3 counties that I primarily practice in to do my practice. And that's kind of helped me become a solo practitioner.
Are there things that you miss about having other people in your office?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's not as difficult now. When I first started practicing, I would miss, if I was by myself, which I wasn't until 2 years ago, having another lawyer around to bounce ideas off of. But that over the last 10, even 15 years has kind of gone. I'm part of a statewide organization that I have other attorneys across the state that not only by email, but by cell phone and text, I have instant communication with as needed.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what I miss is having the camaraderie of other attorneys in the office, having a glass of wine at the end of the day, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But you get over that, and you've got people that'll stop in anyway and have a glass of wine at the end of the day.
Yeah, a wine collector you are.
I'm just a wine drinker. I just have a lot more wine than I can drink.
Yeah. How'd you get into that?
Well, you've met Mark, my good friend.
Mm-hmm.
He and I and his wife and my wife would start to travel places together. We've been friends since high school, and our kids have grown up. They know each other. Mm-hmm. Well, one day he found this trip out to Napa Valley, I want to say 20 years ago. And so we went out there and enjoyed the wine. Before that, I could drink Yellowtail or Barefoot or any of the decent little $5 bottle wine. Once you go out to Napa, two things happen. You can't drink lousy wine anymore, and you buy more than you can drink usually, and you have to ship it back to your home, and then you've got to get someplace to store it. Mm-hmm. So, we're fortunate in that we've got a full basement, and it stores very well down there.
Yeah. See, I guess I could say like I was kind of like beginning you when you were getting into your hobby in wine, and that, I could drink like some of the lower end stuff, but I didn't really understand, I guess, scaling upwards with it, and now I've gotten to where some of the cheaper stuff, I can't really do it as well.
I'm sorry, I might have done that to you.
Yeah. Well, there was a game in college that they used to play. It was called Slap the Bag. And are you familiar with this?
Slap the bag?
Slap the bag. Slap the bag.
Slap the bag. Okay.
Okay. Well, anyways, it's an old party game, but it's where you take a boxed wine, you pull the bag out of it. And you see it a lot at like frat parties now, but they'll hold this bag up and you basically slap it, and then you turn the spigot on it and drink until you don't want to drink it anymore. But that was one.
And you say that because boxed wine is traditionally bad wine, but I've got some boxed wine that'll knock your socks off.
I'm sure you do.
It's literally 4 bottles of wine, and it's $80 a box.
Yeah.
It's good wine. There's some good wine in boxes. There's some good wine in screw caps, so.
Yeah. So what about, when you're young, did you have parents in the legal field? What did your...
No. Yeah. Well, I take that back. My mom worked as a legal secretary when I was in high school in Rogers, Arkansas. Dad was Air Force and then got into manufacturing. Mom was secretarial. I'm the first lawyer, I think, on either side of the family that I'm aware of. How's that?
Okay, that's perfect. So why did you end up choosing to do law?
Because I always told everybody I was going to be a lawyer as a kid. But in reality, I graduated. I got a job after undergrad working as basically a social worker, as a house parent at a teenage halfway house where there were 4 adults and 8 kids. And the kids were sometimes court placements and sometimes voluntary placements. And our job was to reunify the family, the teenager and the family. And so we went through, I've had that systematic training for effective parenting. It's called the STEP program back in the early 80s, late 70s. And we would work towards reuniting the teenager with the parent. And so after a year of that, I said, this is Band-Aid work. I want to get into juvenile law. So I applied to one law school that had a juvenile law program, and it was St. Louis University. Had they not accepted me, I wouldn't have gone to law school because I was the only law school I applied to. And so went to law school and got married 3 weeks before I started law school. And I took the job after undergrad because Chris was a year behind me.
Yeah.
And so I waited around. I lived in Valparaiso for a year. That's where I worked.
So you have a interesting perspective that you could probably speak on. So I tell listeners often that my wife is in law school, your daughter, and
heard that.
Yeah, you may have heard that. And she's actually pretty similar to you in that she wants to do juvenile work, she wants to do criminal defense work, but I think about how, like, there's a lot of times where I'm bored because she's studying or whatever. What is it like being the student in that situation when your spouse is having to basically fill their time? And can you remember that far back? I'm sure you can.
I'm going to smack you when I see you guys. It was a situation where Chris worked and we had student loans. So I did law school during the day, and then at night, we didn't have a pandemic to deal with where I was staying at home and didn't have a job. I couldn't, she drove over to Illinois and worked at the Army base, came back. I went to law school, came home. At the end of the day, we tried to be a married couple as opposed to me still being a student. So I don't have a lot of bad memories in that it hurt the relationship in the sense of I wasn't able to spend time with my spouse, except for the summer after I graduated, where I had to pass the bar, and all I did was study for the bar exam for a month or two, and then thank God passed it.
Yeah, I've heard that's a real put your head down preparation type test. And it's kind of interesting being on the other side of that, because I feel like my role while Monica's in school is to be as supportive as I can be, try to make sure that she feels encouraged. She's still, going strong, and whenever she needs to just kind of rest, try to stop everything I'm doing and, let's go do whatever. I may not be the best at that all the time, but that's at least my goal, is to do that. But
she hasn't shot you yet, has she?
No, she hasn't. But
there you go. You're successful.
Yeah, I know. But I do find it interesting that, you were able to make that time back then, because I think about a lot of, there's a lot of transition in between probably your commute to school, her commute to work, and you still probably did have to hit books when y'all were hanging out.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
We lived literally 3 blocks from school. So I walked to school and rode my bike, and she lived 10 minutes and always in the opposite direction of the traffic. So we lived kind of downtown St. Louis. She would drive out towards Illinois while everybody's driving into St. Louis, and then the reverse. So her commute was 30 minutes tops. Yeah. My walk was 20 minutes. So we didn't lose a lot of time to commuting. And then look at that concept of making time. You said, how about the 6 kids, and how was that? We made time for that all the way through 6 children. For example, I own a car that's a 2-seater. My wife and I, and we've had a 2-seater car forever. My kids know that's the date car. Mom and Dad are going out by themselves, and we're not allowed to go with them. We went on vacation a lot without our kids. We still go on vacation with our kids, but there were many times when we went on vacation just the 2 of us. Yeah. And the kids would always ask, well, why are you not taking us? And we would respond, if you want Mom and Dad to still be Mom and Dad and not kill each other or you, we've got to go on vacation by ourselves for this little bit of time. Sanity maintenance.
Sanity maintenance. Well, that's definitely important, is making sure. And y'all still do that to this day. Y'all just get out, and y'all been known to go hang out and party in Gulf Shores for
once in a while.
Once in a while. And then it's 2 trips a year. Where's the other one to?
Somewhere in California, usually in Sonoma.
Yeah. Man. It's good to get out. So, hey, let's take a brief commercial break. Okay, welcome back.
That was a nice commercial break, John.
I know, we needed it. So, okay, tell me a little bit, if you can, because you're a lawyer and there's some things that you can and can't talk about. What is some of the interesting cases that you've worked in your day?
Well, let's see. I have worked death penalty cases, and for a criminal defense attorney, that's probably as interesting as it's going to get. You've got I do all sorts of, rape cases, child sex cases, regular murders without being death penalty, assaults, drug cases. They run the gauntlet, and we do all of those.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that, and people always ask, well, gee, isn't it hard to represent them guilty people? And in reality, somebody that comes into your office and tells you right up front, hey, I did it, I'm guilty, give me the best deal you can, is a lot easier to represent than somebody that comes into your office and says, I did not do it. And you try to get the evidence together and it still looks bad for them, but they're not going to take a deal because they're not guilty. And I can't explain, I can't show them, look, economics dictates you take a deal whether you're guilty or not, versus if I were you in justice, I wouldn't say I was guilty to something I'm not guilty of, okay? And those are the dynamics playing against one another in any profile case, okay? But if all things fail and you must go to trial, the hardest thing I have had is representing somebody that I believe is innocent, and yet the jury finds them guilty and they get to go to prison. That's harder than representing any guilty person.
Yeah.
So, but death penalty cases are interesting when you are in front of a jury and you're asking a jury to consider not putting a man to death. You're past the guilt phase, for example. Let's say we all agree he's guilty. Now you're talking about life in prison the rest of his life, or just life in prison until they shoot him up with the drugs that kill him. If you don't feel the fire coming out of your fingertips when you're in front of a jury asking for a man's life, you're in the wrong business, because that's interesting work to me. It's stressful. It puts gray hair in your hair. That's some of the more interesting ones. And what I also see is doing this as long as I have, this is going into my 38th year, is I've represented kids 25 years ago that were in their late teens, early 20s. You basically become everybody's dad. Mm-hmm. And so a kid who's now 50 was represented by me when he was 20. Mm-hmm. So 30 years later, and I'll see him, and he'll have his kids with him, and maybe one of his grandkids now. And he'll come up to me and go, Mr. Cisar, it is so good to see you. You changed, and I'm like, who are you? Mm-hmm. And he's like, you changed my life 30 years ago when you told me to get my head out of my rear end, straighten up my life and walk, do the right thing. I took it to heart because I didn't want to go to prison. And I want you to know, thank you, shaking your hand, thank you very much. And that happens enough times that, it does bring satisfaction to you, that somewhere, somehow you've done something in the right direction. You truly feel like this is what, the good Lord has called you to, and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And then you get the clients that are mad at you. So.
Yeah, but the first part of that sounds so fulfilling.
It is.
I mean, why would you? Do you believe in having a purpose? Like you've got things that you were put on this earth to do.
I mean, I think we all do. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you get true fulfillment in when you're maximizing that purpose. Like I tell people that, right now, my purposes, my gifts are leadership and encouragement. And when I'm doing those things, that's when I'm fulfilled. I go to bed happy that night. Right. So as you do this, I mean, have you ever had nights that were restless, that were difficult, those kind of things?
Yes.
What caused that?
this past year, right before COVID, I had a kid that, we pled him. We didn't want to try the case because we were afraid of what would happen. We pled him. I thought it was a decent case for probation because of the amount of time he had done in the county. The prosecutor asked for an ungodly amount of time, and the judge could have split the difference, but the judge put this kid in prison for the ungodly amount of time, and I'm still losing sleep over that one, And I look back, and of course you always look back and you say, well, I should have done that different, or I should have done that different, and you have ways you would have done things differently, but still, you've got to rely on the concept that, well, no, I prepared, I made the argument, I cannot control what the judge is going to do sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I don't.
So yes, there are restless nights.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving from that, obviously you said you've been doing this 38 years.
Going on, 37 and a half.
You have many peers.
I started in the fall of 1983. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. Many years. So you have many peers, and you've had, all this experience. What is something that do you try to impart your wisdom on the next generation? Do you have people that you're speaking into now? Did you have mentors growing up and people that you mentor now?
Yes, to both. I've had, now, unfortunately, I walk into the courtroom. I'm one of the older, if not the oldest lawyer, usually. But when I was coming up in the 80s and 90s even, I had many people that mentored me in my practice. And most of them aren't here anymore. Some still are. But I make it a point, and I think that's a lot. Every good lawyer I know does that. Make a point to turn around and bring the next generation of lawyers into a decent place in the practice of law, as far as how to do things, what's the proper way to do things, don't act like that kind of thing. So.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I find that mentorship aspect like really aligning with you, because like I know how you speak into each one of your kids and even those who are married into your family that aren't your kids. And I can only imagine that how you are with your peers, with people who have worked with you, they probably appreciate you just as much as we do because of how willing you are to speak into them.
I hope so.
I don't know if any of that made any sense, but
it did. And it gets back to, you talked to me earlier about, well, you have this presence, this gift. I understand that I have spoken into the lives of my children and my clients. I very rarely recognize that in myself. I call it living. This is what I do, and hopefully people listen to me. But then I hear my children, my sons-in-laws, my daughters-in-laws, I hear my clients, I hear my staff speak back to me these things that I have spoken into their lives. It humbles me, and I don't even realize it's happening. Yeah. So yes is the answer, but wow.
Yeah. No, it's weird. I mean, it really is like a weird thing to, I guess, reflect on, especially when you say that you just call it living, right? Like you're just out there being Tim Cisar, doing what you do, and people just go, wow, this guy's like, he's really pretty amazing. He's a pretty cool dude.
Very rarely does that come back.
So, okay, last thing I really want to ask you about, if you had any advice for any young people or just anybody listening, what would you say to them? What life advice would you give?
Well, a couple of things. One, you have a right to remain silent. Professionally, that was the very hardest thing for me to learn how to do. Just shut up. I had a judge tell me once in the middle of one of my great arguments. In fact, it was first month I was practicing. I love this guy. But right in the middle of my great oration to win my argument, the judge said, "Mr. Cisar, you're about ready to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory." And I shut right up, said no more words, and won my motion.
Yeah.
So, thus the beginning of how to be quiet. That's the hardest thing I've ever learned in myself. And it works on so many levels. You have the right to remain silent. The other thing I give out to people, and mostly it's in the beginning phases of criminal interviews, they want to hire me as a criminal defense attorney. And I say, well, this is what will happen if you keep doing what you're doing. You know, we can maybe work around this one. You're still a young person. You've not had too much of a record. This is for usually the first timers. But then we'll get that down to it. And I said, well, if you continue to do this, you're going to find yourself in prison. And I can either do it over the phone where I haven't met them, or if it's face to face, I can say, and now that I've met you, let me give you some advice. You're too cute to go to prison. And people, that's good advice. People need to understand. Most of us are too cute to go to prison.
Oh, man, that's great. That's great. So, well, Tim, thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening to come on and do the podcast.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Is there any way people can find you? Do you want people to find you?
I've gotten rid of all my phone books. I said, go away. I've gotten to that point in my life where most of the business that comes in my office is either people Googling good lawyer, Lake of the Ozarks, and my name comes up, or referral.
Yeah.
Okay? So you can check out my website, CisarLawFirm.com. Now, the good thing is I spell my name because the way my father spelled it, because his father, and so on, Cisar. But I and GoDaddy, we have a thing going.
Okay.
I have bought up every spelling of Cisar that's common. So if you put Cisar Law Firm and you spell it any way you want, that's an acceptable Cisar Law Firm, kind of, CEA, CAE, CES, that kind of thing, you're going to come to my website. So there you go.
Forward thinking.
Well, I got tired of explaining to people, I couldn't find you on them. You weren't spelling it right, so I just said, yeah, that's the cheapest $200 I spend every year.
Man, there you go. Well, Tim, thanks again, man.
My pleasure. Anytime. If you ever want to do round two, you just let me know. Okay?
Will do.